All right, George, welcome back.
It's great to be back.
It's a long time
It
coming.
has been a long time. You beat me to it, a long time coming.
I think I'm gonna now misuse that statement.
You know,
about tunapatana na mtu. It's been
a long time coming.
So I think the conversation that we previously had had a very huge impact, especially on our online audience. And I'd like to pick you up on it's a comment that was made.
Yeah.
Someone said that so the reel was all about how difficult conversations actually mark the beginning of the end of relationships and the fate of relationships.
Yeah.
But this person just said, I disagree. It's contempt. And like I was saying, sometimes we might truly fail to understand how to perceive some of these things, because especially mtu mwenye alisema contempt, I don't think he truly took a moment and understood. You know, sometimes I believe there are things that we know, but far from the things that we know, the things that affect us the most are the things that we actually do not know.
They are known.
Yes, they are known. I think Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will
always happen to you. Things will happen and you'll call it fate.
Exactly.
Fate, yeah.
Exactly. So this process of making I think that conversation was more directed towards that path. And again, quoting from Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Between stimulus and response, there's a space. We're talking a lot about the person of Jesus Christ. I think he was the embodiment of that a lot. Before we even started rolling, before you arrived,
Yes.
we were having a conversation with our crew here. And I think it's in the book of Proverbs. As a man thinketh in his heart, so he is.
Yeah.
So is he.
Yeah.
And there's a, let me call it a sermon I once watched by Dr. Miles Monroe. And so part of what he was saying, there's a concept known as the tripartite nature of man. It's constituted of three concepts. There's a soul, there's the body, and there's the spirit. And it's in the soul. It's the soul where the seat of our will, our emotions, and
mind,
the mind
yeah,
itself
mind, will,
is.
emotions, yeah.
Exactly. It's there in the soul. And I can't help but think, this verse that as a man thinketh in his heart,
So
it's more to do with how we actually respond. You see that space between stimulus and response. I think we can look at stimulus as triggers, and then how we're going to respond. So there's that sacred space. And I think that is what Viktor Frankl was trying to tell us. And it's very, very much connected to emotional intelligence.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I love how you've brought us into that. And of course, as you rightly say, the space. In fact, we could probably have a whole episode just talking about the space. So between stimulus and response is a space. And that space determines the way the person will go.
Yeah.
And so the thing about that space, and you've also alluded to the tripartite nature of man, is that in that exists, of course, you said the soul, the mind,
And the spirit.
and the spirit.
The soul, the body, and the spirit.
The soul, body, and spirit. And now the soul in itself also has like the three which you're very clearly articulated as the mind, the will, and emotions. And so we could probably zoom in on the soul. And it's funny because some of the best work I've been able to do and continue to do with an amazing group of men, and now I know some ladies are doing this work, is what we like to call soul work.
Soul work.
Soul work. And so through the Crucible Project, it's become possible for men and women to be able to go through very, very immersive experiences, which I would call life-changing, that empower or enable the individuals going through that to actually be able to deeply introspect, very deeply introspect, and understand what causes them to do what they do, what causes them to act the way they act. That's a space, because a space in many ways can be called like a processor, or in fact, one of the coaches we've worked with talks about an internal operating system, and what that basically is, it is like you know how we have a sieve or a filter, which the experiences we go through, the things we hear, the data that comes our way has to go through that.
Yeah.
And as it does go through that, there's something that goes on, some sifting, there's some processing, and then of course there's a return.
Yeah. And
And yes, so you could talk about what comes in. You don't really have control of what comes in. What people will talk about is what goes out. Now, if you go back to the difficult conversations, you reflect on, this person said this to me, and that is why I'm not speaking to them anymore. Or this person did this to me, and that is why. Or this person did not do. Okay, my point.
Yeah.
And that's all well and good. And all the work we do, helping in organizations and teams, a lot of the times we find ourselves in conversations around what this team did to that team, or what this team failed to do to the other team, etc.
Yeah.
However, what I love about the space is that it gives us a snapshot or a picture of what happens before output. So the world will always send you away all kinds of signals. And then sometimes we also send out to the world all kinds of signals. But the space is that internal, private sanctum where things are processed. Now, the interesting thing, it's not like a instantaneous reaction where you know someone says something to you, 2 seconds later you've said something back. Today, I want to say and I submit to you that there are people who are actually putting out to the universe, into the world, products of inputs that came in a decade ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago.
Trauma projection.
There you go. And so it's not like it comes in like this and 2 seconds later it's out. What we see manifested in our relationships, what we see manifested in our families, what you see manifested in our teams, in our businesses, in all kinds of social interactions, often is the output of years or decades of certain type of things coming in. But more importantly, there's this space we keep talking about, and the picture coming to my mind is like of a pot or a kettle. And so in that space, whatever is brought in simmers or stews. And for those who like a good cup of coffee or tea or even something a bit stronger, brews.
Yeah.
You get my point? And then what comes out, so when you see people, you hear this person did this or did that or said this or said that, it's actually an output or a product of them. And so when you talk about emotional intelligence, which is something which I look forward to speaking about even on this particular episode, it is the most, I would want to say it's like probably the most important thing that every individual needs to invest in if they're going to be in a relationship that's going to work, or they're going to be part of a team, or in leadership, you know, or be blessed to have children who they need to raise up, or other people who they need to impact. Awareness and a consciousness of my space, of my, you know, internal operating system. What happens in there? What are the key components of it? What's the state? You know, we do a lot of work to look the part right now, and I think men are not an exception when it comes to the beauty and the grooming and the, you know, fashion image industry. We do amazing. People are doing an amazing work to show up in the best possible way. And then, of course, closely to that is health and wellness. We have much more awareness about health and wellness, which we do as much as we can in terms of, you know, all the wellness guidelines in terms of diet and lifestyle, etc. But unfortunately, we don't get to do as much soul work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yet from the soul, in fact, like you rightly quoted, in the Bible, it says that you need to guard your heart because it's the wellspring. Above all else, because the wellspring of life. From it, all things
comes the issues of life.
Issues of life.
Wow.
And so
like
it's interesting how today you've taken us to church, and it's
please do not mistake me for a pastor.
You know, Bishop Alex.
Preacher.
You know,
no.
Apostle. But anyway, you've taken us to church. You know, and it's interesting because, of course, that's where I'd say my faith is founded on, and all knowledge, wisdom, and I like to say inspiration comes from above. Yeah. And whenever we get to know through research and through learning and through different breakthroughs that come, I like to say that it's like God allows us to get a little bit more enlightenment of what His wisdom is nature and knowledge is. And so coming into emotional, what we call emotional intelligence, EQ, it's not a necessarily new thing. It's just that as the years have progressed and different people doing some fantastic work to be able to give clarity and give direction and frameworks around emotional intelligence, it's much more easy to know what we're dealing with,
Absolutely.
And closely related to EQ and emotional intelligence is what I like to call self-awareness. Self-awareness, I feel, is something that every individual needs to have. Because again, closely related to the emotional intelligence, closely related to our space, closely related to our wellspring, is that awareness. So it's one thing to have, I have a deep core in me from which things come out. Everybody has it. It's one thing to have it, but it's a whole other thing to have awareness of it and what is going on in there. So like I said, the beauty and the image and the wellness industry, we do all the good work to make sure we are at the top of our game. Unfortunately, because of not having enough awareness, people have not put in enough work, unfortunately, to have a good state of that space, our internal, and that's what makes me get up every day, knowing that there's amazing and great work to be done to support individuals, teams, and whole organizations around getting to be more self-aware, getting to be able to move from this point of awareness and clarity to the next point, beginning to make more conscious decisions and informed decisions around how to carry themselves, how to interact, how to engage, and how to, of course, collectively have a better reality. So in reality, when I talk about culture, organizational culture, I'd like to say, of course, sometimes organizational culture sounds like a complex thing, and it can be complex. But when you think about how people treat each other, how people treat colleagues, how people are treated by the leaders, how leaders treat, or how leaders treat each other, and even how the clients are treated, a lot of the work that goes into defining and fixing culture of organization is around that. And so if we are to track back to where we are right now, the space, it's at that heart of every individual. That where the ideal organization, the ideal community, ideal society can come from.
Wow. I really like that background. And as you are painting that kind of a picture, something else came to mind. I'm not sure if it's Dostoevsky or Solzhenitsyn, those two Russian playwrights and philosophers. There's one who said that between good and evil is a very thin line. And that thin line is what is called human nature. And so as you kept painting that picture, I was like, could it be that human nature is also all about that space that you're talking between stimulus and response? In a way, I'm viewing that kind of a dualism as good and evil as well, because it's that space that divides good and evil. It's also that space that's gonna make us respond in a certain way. So speaking of which as well, do you think, but this is something, I don't know how best to describe it, but do you think that kunaweza kuwa na other kinds of influences on the human psyche that could make people respond in ways that even science itself cannot describe, that even the frameworks of EQ cannot describe? What do you think? I think we now there's this whole concept of I think in spirituality we call it the supernatural. In things like parapsychology and the study of psychological phenomena, there's a word I'm trying to look for in it. I think it's panpsychism, something of the sort. That now people believe, actually very many reductionist scientists believe, that the mind is something that is an emergent property of the brain. Like the mind is not something that is apart from the brain, like it has its own kind of a nature other than the brain. A consciousness, it doesn't have its own kind of nature other than the brain. So the kind of evidence they normally give is things to do with how you can induce certain drugs and manipulate certain or distort certain brain parts, and so consciousness is going to be altered. So given that kind of evidence, they believe that the mind is simply an emergent property of the brain. But then again, I'd say in my own view, in my own opinion, it seems to me ni kama consciousness is the thing that actually gives us the brain. But it's not that from the brain we get consciousness. So that is why I'm actually proposing there are actually things that could have an influence on that space, on the mind, on our consciousness, that science cannot explain, science cannot describe. Because sometimes ushawaisikia ati kuna watu tu mahali ni kama wamerogwa. Just put it that way. No matter how hard they try, no matter utawapeleka therapy, they're going to be talked to, they're going to be administered to by pastors and stuff, they're going to be prayed, wataombeo, but nothing seems to change.
You know, listening to you, Alex, I just thought to myself, we're going to come back here again. It's going to be, I don't think it's going to be a long time coming. And I'll tell you why. You know, you spoke of couple of things. Let me just pick up from the first thing you spoke of. You spoke of, could there be other things that or factors that drive people's actions? And the fact of the matter is, when you talk about between stimulus and response, between good and evil, the thin line of human nature, I would say the bulk of what organizations, individuals, public events, nations, energy is spent on, sometimes it's just, can I say, taking positions? And
taking
positions and responding to positions other people have taken. You know, we got to remember stimulus response. If you even go through centuries of different civilizations and powers in the world, and you realize that there are many things that cause huge shifts in the way the world works. That were literally based on individuals. Because it's an interesting thing. Actions of individuals and reactions of other individuals and people groups. And so it's interesting you say that could there be something else in play? It's something good to probably explore. But what I'll say, a significant part of our energy, including what you call discoveries in science, and you know, like there's a time there was the race to put the first man on the moon. Talk about now in the AI race, who's going to be the fastest and the quickest to be able to adopt AI and have their, you know, their platforms and their, can I say, almost like dominance in that space. Information age, name it. So you find that even the markets, whether it's technology, whether it's political or military power, science, business and finance. So you find that almost every sector of society, and if you go macro, nations who have alliances and some sort of different blocks, their actions and possibly reactions are driven by the actions and the reactions of other would be allies or would be adversaries. And so it'd be interesting to explore to see whether there's something else that goes into. And I think you spoke of humanity. I mean, we have moments where, and that's why you hear people say, at least my faith in humanity is not completely lost. We have moments in life, moments in history, where we are all unified by one common problem. I think the pandemic is a classic case where it doesn't matter your creed, or your race, your whatever it is, social standing, that we are all human beings. I think the same applies when you have major crises, like, you know, the earthquakes and floods and all those different things, and fires, exactly, where we are all united as human beings, and we have what we call the human spirit that sort of pulls us together, and the collective value and sanctity of human life. But there are not that many. They are few and far between. You know what I mean? In fact, it's funny because when the closest to my mind is a pandemic, where I remember I actually stopped for a moment and thought, you know what? For the first time in our lifetime, even the political temperatures are, not even temperatures, there was literally no political rhetoric. Everything in the news, everything
during the pandemic.
Yes, was about how can we take care of ourselves, take care of our families, how can we help those who are most vulnerable in society, period. It was a short time because before long, few scandals started leaking here and there. But it was a golden, if you remember that time, it was a golden time where humanity, it was just about us being human and trying to be the best we can for ourselves and for those people who are closest to us. So the second one you spoke of was a question of, it was a very complex one. But I thought about something which I wanted to speak when you said it, regarding the mind being a construct of the brain. It's funny because we started with the EQ piece, and the funny thing about EQ and emotional intelligence is that, I've come to learn through some of the trainings I've gone through, and there's one really exciting training I got to learn of around how we have our head, which is our brain.
Yeah.
We have our heart, and we also have our gut.
Yeah, the gut.
And it sounds like a very popular gut feeling. It sounds like a colloquialism. You know what I mean? And when someone says like, I this thing just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. Just something in me. Or you have an exam coming up or an interview and you have butterflies in your stomach, right? There's your mind, head. There's some things that are purely logical.
Yeah.
Decisions that are purely logical. It's like you're either driving or you're playing a sport. It's just those quick, calculative decisions. And you can tell this is just something you think through and do.
Yeah.
But then there's some things that are heart driven. And you can use logic to justify it, but the decision was made in the heart. For instance, they say up to 70% of purchasing decisions are actually emotional. Did you know that?
70% of?
Almost 70% of purchasing decisions.
They're made from the heart.
Yes, they're emotional. In fact,
expound a little bit on that.
So if people make decisions based on emotions, but then they use their mind or their brain to justify it. And that's why they say sex sells. And you know what we look at advertising products that are possibly focused on men, or even by extension, those that will be focused on lady consumers, how they are positioned, how they are packaged, etc. Because there are certain deep-seated emotional triggers that need to be hit. And you find some of those products, whether it's in the skincare, beauty, auto industry, tech industry, they play it very well. And that's why we have ad agencies, Sure. And so going further, yes, the mind is a construct of the brain because of the physiology and everything, but there's much more to us. And that's why if you're an avid follower of science, and sometimes the people in popular culture, they go a bit far with it, where you see stories of people who have gone through heart transplants. And of course, heart transplants technology has been there for some time. And there has been some sort of like follow up on certain patients who had heart transplants, and it has been said that there are certain little things that happen to the recipient that could be from the donor. So there is evidence to suggest that the heart, whether it's certain preferences, certain subtle, For instance, I think I remember seeing a story of a lady who was, I think, in her 60s, and she got a heart from a 30-something-year-old male. Yeah, you can imagine. So there's certain elements of very subtle.
There's something about who they are changed.
Yes.
Things like.
So like even they just found themselves with a certain. It's a very fascinating thing. In fact, I have to look into either liking or appeal for certain things that they could not previously account for having before.
Okay.
So just to take it further, the fact of the matter is, our mind, and of course how God created us so wonderfully, is not, that's what my assertion is, just limited to our brain. I'll tell you something I learned the other day. You can look it up. It's crazy. I learned about pelvic intelligence. Pelvic, our pelvic area.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Pelvic intelligence.
What's that?
And I'll tell you what, and we can go into it. We can come back on that. But when it comes to pelvic intelligence, talk about the gut and the what they call GIT, the gastrointestinal system. You realize our emotional state manifests beyond in our heart. So pelvic intelligence, just to give you a snippet of it, there's a correlation between our emotions, and that's why, for instance, sex is an emotional thing. And the emotional state of a person significantly contributes to how they show up, and not just about the physiological or the performance. And when you hear they say, for instance, issues to do with even soul ties, and issues to do with how people sometimes can carry vibes and energy across. You get my point?
Yeah.
So there are certain elements that are embedded so deeply in us. So we've talked about the head, we've talked about the heart, talked about the gut, right? So there's even the pelvic intelligence. And so what happens also, just without going too much in the detail, it has also been said that there are certain types of cancers that could actually be correlated to our emotional state. So in other words, our emotions,
Really?
yes, absolutely. And even besides just getting the diagnosis, there are certain people, when they get the diagnosis, and not just cancer, but even other severe diseases, how even their response and the reaction. I think we have so many people who have beaten cancer and have been declared cancer free.
Yeah.
And even the environments in which you live, there are people who have had to change their lifestyle dramatically when they got a cancer diagnosis. So to go further and further and further what you're talking about, the mind is not limited to the brain.
To just the brain.
Perhaps the brain carries the bulk, because that's where the neurons are, the receptors are, and whatever it is that's happening in our body is made meaning of in the mind. Yeah.
Fun fact.
Yes.
Let me interject. Fun fact.
Yes.
Do you know the heart also has its own neural network?
There you go.
Just like the brain.
There you go. So that probably even explains why and how this donor, so this recipient or a recipient of a heart, for instance, could perhaps show subtle, hints of whether it's preferences or something of the donor. You know.
Oh wow.
It's quite deep.
Very
it's quite deep. And so when we talk about that space and we talk about how the space is, I think the bigger thing to do is actually take time to actually think through is, what is my space? You can spend a lifetime trying to understand who am I. And of course, once you begin to understand who you are and what drives me, what has been influenced and deposited in me as I came up. Because of the other thing you spoke about certain people, you wonder what can be done to help them, what influences how they act and react. But the fact of the matter is, we are a product of our environment. There's nature and there's nurture. So when you show up into an office, when you show up into a relationship, when you show up into a community, we're not just Alex, who is well put together here, dashing, handsome young man. You are Alex and X number of decades, this community you've lived in, this sibling, that relationship that did not work, and. And so it's not worn on, you don't wear it on your face, but you show up with that. And so when something happens, right, people take whatever is being taken. I'm looking at a red t-shirt. It's not just a red t-shirt. I take that information and I take it into that filter that I have and I process it. Remember, my filter could be, like if you have a car that's not been serviced well, some cars have filters in their systems. Yeah. If you have you can, whatever is coming in, ama kichungi, let me use kichungi. Yeah. If you try and make maybe tea with a kichungi that made tea 2 days ago or had ginger tea, what's going to happen? The new tea will be influenced by that kichungi, that filter. So what I'm basically saying is that we don't just show up the way we show up. You get my point? We show up, or the way people perceive us, we show up with a whole lot of unseen and unobservable. Could be as easy as the iceberg. You know how the iceberg has a little part of the tip? Then there's a whole behemoth below the surface. And so it's a very, very fascinating space. It goes into relationships, it goes into careers. There are people who thrive and do fabulously well. It goes to business entrepreneurship. There are people who do phenomenally well. It goes into leadership. There are people who lead everywhere they go. It goes into influence society, and. In the same breath, there are people who could have been and could have risen to a very much higher level in all those different spheres of society. But there are certain blockers, impediments, that just completely make it impossible for them to. And for some, it's extreme. Some, it's along the way. You can identify them and you can work through them. And that's where coaching comes in.
Wow.
Because now in coaching, we then support individuals to get more awareness, get more clarity.
Well, let me pick your mind on just something small before now we proceed to the heart of the thing itself. Yeah. I think it was in, I'm not sure, kama ilikuwa 2008, where the gay gene was debunked. People thought that homosexuality was genetic. but it wasn't. It isn't. It's not genetic. But I can't help but think, kuna research that shows that kama mzazi alikuwa an alcoholic, there's a likelihood that their children will also have a proclivity to alcoholism
abuse,
as well.
yeah.
And the research is very, very interesting, because if kitu kama alcoholism, of course it affects the brain, it even changes the chemical structure of the brain, and that in turn might even change the chemical structure of our genetic material, the DNA itself. So could it also mean that pia kuna some behaviors might actually be genetic? So let me give an example. Our parents, sisi majenzi sa I know most of us, we can sort of a majority of us, we have this kind of a story yenye our parents growing up haikuwa sawa vile, we carry a lot of trauma, and the reason for this is because hata our parents wenyewe kuna ile trauma yenye walibeba from their own parents. So it seems ni kama kuna unasikia this biblical verse that sort of talks about exactly
to the nth generation,
to the fourth. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So do you think there's some truth on the genetics bit of it?
Well, without getting to the science, because of course I'm not
a scientist,
but I'll talk about what you talk about, genetics, gene and generation, right? Get it? Yeah.
Oh wow.
Genes, it's from that. You get it? It's where let me tell you something about genetics also, despite the scientific part of it. Within our gene, it's a coding.
Yes.
So we code DNA into.
Mm-hmm.
And they are basically vehicles for carrying our nature.
Yeah, now that's the science behind it. So science can't explain how our nature is sort of encoded in that.
Right, so genes
just
are
protein.
Chemicals. Exactly. But beyond that, similarly, like we're talking about the mind. Because of course, when you think about probably, this goes into what do you believe? And of course, without going into the deep theories of those who don't believe in or do believe in God and creation. Because God, of course, versus science and all that. And think about science and God actually are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
In fact, science is knowledge, the way I see it.
Sure.
And wisdom.
Sometimes I also see science as just, it's not a rule of truth, but it's just a heuristic, something that helps us to understand
what nature is. So what you can't explain, because I think at the heart of it is nature, or creation, or our being. At the heart of it, where it becomes very difficult is what is our source, what is our origin.
Yeah.
But going back into the generational blessings, generational curses, generational patterns. The thing about genes, the fact of the matter is, if you do something long enough and you master it, it becomes you.
Yeah.
You know the thing about mastery.
Yeah.
Right?
It becomes a
signature, it becomes a second nature to you. And that's why when you see scenarios where someone or a family had a predisposition to alcohol abuse, or to any other form of abuse, or there haven't been very good financial decisions, or there have been different types of trauma.
Yeah.
It's not a rule, hard and fast rule that you must go down that path. In fact, there's a story told of two young men who are raised by an alcoholic father. I think you know that story.
Yeah.
And one said, my father was an alcoholic. I will never drink in my life. And the other one unfortunately went down the wrong path. And he said, my father was an alcoholic, and that is why I drink. Both of them have a justification.
Yeah.
You get it? And so goes back to choosing your way. In fact, Viktor Frankl said, when every human freedom is stripped away, the one freedom that remains, and of course, if you go to the history of Viktor Frankl, there were the Holocaust, and the concentration camps and all that. When every one of their human freedoms had been stripped away, you will never lose the freedom to choose. In fact, at some point, you have the freedom to choose: will I live or will I die? For those who are critically ill, it is a choice to some extent.
Sure.
So similarly, you must choose your way. So the fact that you come from a dysfunctional family, the fact that you come from a broken family, the fact that you come from a poor background, and of course we are told the moment you're 30 years and above, you are the background. You can't sing the song, I come from a poor background. You are the background now. In fact, because by 30, most people begin to have children.
Yeah.
So you can't be singing the song, I come from a poor background. You are the background of your children. So what have you done?
Sure.
So
not much is done to eliminate self-awareness.
That's the thing. So it really does go back into self-awareness. It really does go back into what is the heart of who you are. But at the very basic level, it's that internal environment, that internal operating system, that space. What is going on in that space? And what I'll say, we do a lot now with our security to secure our homes. Cyber security is becoming big.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't do enough to guard that inner sanctum of ourselves. We so often let people into it that probably should not have access. And we let other influences that should not come in.
Yeah.
Not everything that comes in. In fact, I know we said things come in and then they're interpreted. But perhaps there's some things that should not even have come in the first place. Because already, if, for instance, you're coming into an organization, to a relationship, into a family, into a community with X amount of baggage, which you may or may not have dealt with, there's only so much more you can take. So you have to be very conscious. What is your limit?
Wow.
And how then do you protect yourself?
Wow.
Still talking about self-awareness, emotional intelligence.
Yeah. That is a very good background to now the conversation itself, which now takes us to part 2 of this episode.